She lived a quiet life in a small, cramped apartment at the edge of the city, a place where the sounds of traffic and street vendors became part of her daily rhythm. Her mother worked long hours as a maid in nearby homes, cleaning, cooking, and taking care of people who didn't even know her name. Despite the hard work, her mother always returned home with a warm smile, carrying stories from her day, and sometimes a small treat for her daughter, something simple like a pastry or a flower from a neighbor's garden. Her days were mostly predictable. She woke up early in the morning, prepared herself for school, and made sure her mother had a quick breakfast before heading out. The streets she walked were familiar, lined with old trees and apartment buildings with peeling paint. She knew every shortcut, every pothole, and even which street vendors offered the best fruit at the cheapest price. It was a life that seemed ordinary to anyone passing by, but beneath that ordinary life was a girl who carried a secret she had kept hidden for years. At school, she was quiet, sitting at the back of the classroom, often avoiding attention. She did her homework on time, always polite to teachers, and never complained. Some of her classmates whispered about her, calling her shy, weak, or invisible. They didn't notice the way her eyes followed everything, taking in the world with careful observation. They didn't know that her quiet demeanor was not weakness. It was self-control, a way to measure the world before she reacted. Outside of school, she helped her mother with chores. They shared a small room with a thin mattress, a wooden wardrobe, and a table that often doubled as a study desk and dining space. She washed clothes by hand, swept the floor, and prepared meals with whatever ingredients were available. Even in these simple tasks, there was a rhythm and focus she enjoyed. Each task she completed reminded her that she could handle responsibility, that she could manage her world even when it felt small and limited. What nobody knew, not her classmates and certainly not the teachers, was that she had been training in martial arts since she was very young. Her mother had enrolled her in a small dojo when she was just 6 years old, hoping it would give her confidence and discipline. Over the years, she had become incredibly skilled, mastering techniques that could surprise even grown men. Yet she never boasted about it. At school, she never mentioned her training. She wore her uniforms without the belts, kept her hair in simple braids, and let people underestimate her. To the outside world, she was just the maid's quiet daughter. Some mornings, she would wake up before the sun, putting on her old, worn training outfit and practicing movements in the small space of their apartment. Her punches were precise, her kicks controlled, her focus sharp. She imagined scenarios where she would need to defend herself, and she trained for each one silently. These private sessions were her own world, a place where she could be strong and confident, a stark contrast to the shy, quiet girl everyone saw at school. Her classmates began to notice her quietness. Some of them found it amusing, whispering behind her back, laughing at how she never joined in on games or conversations. A few of them, feeling bold, decided it would be fun to tease her directly. At first it was small things, a shove in the hallway, a mocking comment in class, or pretending to trip her. She didn't fight back. She smiled politely, said nothing, and walked away. Her calm reaction frustrated them. They expected fear, tears, or anger, but all they got was quiet composure. That only encouraged them more. The main group of bullies in her school were the type who enjoyed showing power over those they considered weaker. They would often gather near the school entrance, pushing and teasing smaller kids for fun. When they noticed her, they saw a perfect target. She didn't react like the others, and that made them curious, even more determined to get a reaction from her. They began planning small tricks, thinking it would be funny to scare her, not knowing that she had the strength to handle much more than they could imagine. One afternoon, while she was walking home from school, carrying her books carefully under her arm, they blocked her path. There were 4 of them, taller and heavier than her. They smiled mockingly, leaning against the walls, acting as though they owned the street. One of them stepped forward, wagging a finger in front of her face, teasing her about something trivial, just to provoke a reaction. Her heart beat steadily, not with fear but with calm focus. She sized them up silently, noticing each movement, each hesitation, each opportunity they gave her by underestimating her. Instead of panicking or yelling, She stopped and looked them in the eyes. Her calm gaze made them uneasy. They expected her to stumble, to back away, or to show fear, but she didn't. She simply said, in a quiet voice, "If you're trying to scare me, you'll have to try harder." The words were simple, but there was a subtle strength in her tone that made the bullies glance at each other. They weren't sure what to make of it. No one had ever talked to them like that before. The day ended without incident, but it set the stage for what was to come. The bullies were intrigued, almost obsessed with the idea of breaking her composure. They started watching her at school, noting the way she walked, the way she carried her bag, the way she greeted her teachers politely. They planned a bigger prank, thinking it would finally get the reaction they wanted. Meanwhile, she continued her life as usual. She helped her mother, did her homework, practiced her moves quietly in her room, and watched the world with sharp eyes, always ready, always calm. Her mother never fully knew the depth of her training. She knew her daughter practiced martial arts and had talent, but she didn't know how powerful she had become. Sometimes, she would notice bruises or scratches and ask about them, to which her daughter would simply smile and say they happened during practice. The mother was proud but unaware of the true potential her daughter held. This unspoken secret gave the girl an inner confidence that was invisible to everyone around her. The story of her quiet life, the teasing classmates, and the hidden strength was only beginning. It was a life filled with contrasts. The ordinary and the extraordinary, the quiet and the powerful, the seen and the unseen. People thought they knew her, but they were wrong. Every day, she learned to navigate the challenges of school, the expectations of life, and the hidden world of her own abilities. She was a girl who could have been overlooked, ignored, or underestimated, but she had something far more important: control, skill, and the patience to wait for the right moment to show the world who she truly was. Evenings were the best time of the day. After finishing her homework and helping her mother prepare dinner, she would step outside into the cool air, feeling the soft breeze on her face. Sometimes she imagined future scenarios, challenges, and moments where she might need to defend herself or someone else. She would practice moves in her mind, rehearse responses, and feel a thrill of readiness. No one else knew of this inner world, and that secrecy was part of her strength. It was a quiet power, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the moment it would need to be revealed. Her life seemed ordinary to those who passed her by, but every small action, every careful observation, every disciplined move in her training contributed to a readiness that no one could guess. She learned that true strength was not just about skill, it was about patience, observation, and knowing when to act. She knew that one day, she might face a situation where her abilities would be tested in a very real way. And when that day came, she would not falter. She would not be intimidated, and she would show the world that even a quiet, seemingly ordinary girl could hold extraordinary power. For now, she continued her life with careful steps, polite words, and a hidden fire. The bullies thought they could provoke her. They thought they knew her limits. They didn't, and she was ready to show them, when the time was right, that appearances could be deceiving, and that even the quietest person could hold the strength to change everything around them. The following week at school, the bullies were restless. They had noticed her calm demeanor and polite silence, and it made them more curious than angry. It was unusual. Most of the students they picked on screamed, cried, or at least ran away, but not her. She simply walked past them as though they were invisible, and that irritated them. They whispered among themselves, planning something that they thought would finally get a reaction. They watched her carefully in the classrooms, taking notes on when she was alone, when she walked through the hallways, and even which teachers seemed distracted enough to not notice small pranks. It was a game for them, a way to show dominance. One of them suggested a small scare, a shove in the corridor or tripping her as she passed, but the others wanted more. They wanted to really embarrass her, to make her feel small in front of everyone. They had no idea what she was capable of. Meanwhile, she continued with her routine. She noticed their attention but didn't let it disturb her. She observed them quietly, keeping track of their movements and timing. She understood that bullies were predictable, and she had learned how to read people through years of training and careful observation. Her calmness, which they mistook for fearlessness, was actually sharp awareness. She had no intention of retaliating unnecessarily, but she knew that when the moment came, she would act decisively. At lunch, she sat at her usual table, quietly eating her meal. A few classmates tried to strike up conversation, asking about her weekend or joking about homework, but she kept her answers short and polite. The bullies approached, leaning against the table with smirks, pretending to be friendly. They asked harmless questions at first, but soon their teasing became sharper, testing her patience and composure. She responded with calm answers, never raising her voice, never showing irritation. The bullies' smirks grew uncertain. They were used to people reacting with anger or fear, but she didn't give them either. After lunch, they waited for her near the school exit. Their plan was simple. They would block her way, pretend it was an accident, and watch her squirm. As she walked past the final classroom, they stepped into the hallway, casually leaning against the lockers. One of them called her name loudly, pretending to need help with a book. She stopped and turned toward them, a polite smile on her face, waiting to see what they would do next. Their casual gestures and fake friendliness were a test, and she knew it. Suddenly, one of them pushed a locker door open in front of her, forcing her to stop abruptly. Another pretended to trip over her backpack, knocking lightly against her shoulder. The others laughed, waiting for her reaction. She didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at them, her eyes steady and unshaken. Her calmness was unnerving, and for a moment, they hesitated. No one had ever met her like this before. They decided to escalate. They moved to a quieter part of the hallway, away from the teacher's eyes, planning to corner her after school where they thought no one could interfere. They didn't know that she had noticed all their movements for weeks. She had mentally mapped every place they might try something, and she was ready. What they thought would be a simple prank could easily backfire, but they didn't consider that. Throughout the afternoon, she remained composed. In class, she answered questions thoughtfully, quietly impressing her teachers, while mentally preparing herself for what might come after school. She had learned that patience was as important as skill. The bullies thought they controlled the situation, but she was several steps ahead. She imagined every scenario, visualizing responses without panic or haste. This was her secret strength. She remained calm under pressure, allowing herself to act strategically rather than react impulsively. The final bell rang, and students poured out of classrooms into the corridors. The bullies made their move, surrounding her as she walked toward the exit. They blocked her path, pushing and leaning casually, pretending it was all in fun. They laughed, thinking she would finally react with fear or anger. She paused, looking around calmly, taking note of each person's position and every subtle movement. She was not afraid. She was ready. One of them spoke first, trying to intimidate her with a loud, exaggerated voice. "Hey, watch where you're going." He shoved her lightly, expecting her to stumble. She didn't. She remained steady, not giving them the satisfaction of a flinch or a step back. Another tried to grab her backpack, tugging it playfully, thinking she would push back. She didn't. Instead, she moved with precision, subtly adjusting her stance, maintaining balance, and staying composed. Her calmness began to make them uneasy. They tried to corner her further, moving to a side hallway where they thought no one would see. Her mind was clear. She assessed every angle, every exit, every way they could try to intimidate her. She realized that the best response was not to escalate immediately but to wait until the right moment. She could have shown her strength already, but restraint gave her the advantage. They didn't know it yet, but she was not just defending herself with physical skill. She was using intelligence and observation to control the situation. The bullies laughed nervously, noticing her composed stance. They expected a reaction, fear, confusion, or panic, but all they saw was calm confidence. It was unsettling. They whispered to each other, wondering if they were overdoing it. They had underestimated her completely, assuming that a quiet, polite girl could not defend herself. They were about to learn that appearances could be deceiving. Meanwhile, she thought about her mother, who worked hard every day and always returned home tired but smiling. She didn't want to make things worse, didn't want to act recklessly, but she also knew she had to stand up for herself. She remembered all the training, all the lessons about balance, focus, and patience. She realized that this moment was not just about the bullies. It was about showing herself that she could remain calm, collected, and powerful even in the face of intimidation. The bell for school dismissal echoed again as more students began leaving the building. The bullies felt a little pressure, noticing other students nearby who could witness their actions. They laughed loudly, trying to maintain control, but their confidence was waning. Her steady gaze reminded them that she was not an ordinary girl. She wasn't reacting the way they expected. For the first time, they felt uncertain, and that uncertainty made them more reckless. She walked slowly, maintaining distance but never retreating. Her movements were deliberate, measured, and full of quiet strength. She didn't say much, but the calm in her voice and posture spoke volumes. The bullies tried a few more jabs, light shoves, and teasing words, but she handled each one with grace and control. Every time they tried to push her, she adjusted her stance, shifted her weight, and maintained balance. They were starting to realize that this was not going as planned. By the time they reached the school gate, the bullies were frustrated. They had tried their tricks, their jokes, and their intimidation, but she remained calm and collected. Their plan to embarrass her had failed. They glanced at each other, wondering what to do next, unaware that she had been planning all along. She had observed, calculated, and prepared herself, and now they had shown her true intentions. This was not a fight. They had made it a challenge, and she was ready to meet it on her terms. As they finally moved away, thinking the day was over, she continued walking home, feeling the warmth of the late afternoon sun and the familiar sounds of the neighborhood. She reflected on the day, knowing that sooner or later, their teasing would escalate, and when it did, she would be ready. She carried no anger, only a quiet confidence that came from knowing her own abilities and understanding her own limits. She had not needed to show her strength yet, but she knew the moment would come when it would be necessary. Her mother greeted her at home with a tired smile, asking about her day. She spoke briefly about school, careful not to mention the bullies in detail, and focused on helping with the chores. The evening passed quietly, with homework, dinner, and the usual routines. But in her mind, she reviewed the events of the day, planning her next steps. She knew that patience and careful observation were her greatest allies, and she intended to use them wisely. By nightfall, she was in her small room practicing quietly. She went through her movements, her punches, her kicks, and her blocks. Each motion reminded her of the control she had over herself and her surroundings. She wasn't just practicing for defense. She was practicing for confidence, for focus, and for the moment when she would need to show the world the strength that had always been inside her. The bullies might think they had power, but they were mistaken. She held the real power: calm, focus, and skill. The night passed, and she fell asleep with a sense of quiet anticipation. She knew the bullies would not give up so easily, but she also knew that when the right moment came, she would not be intimidated. She had learned patience, she had learned observation, and she had learned the power of calmness. And when the day arrived that she needed to act, she would act with precision, control, and confidence, surprising everyone who had ever underestimated her. The afternoon sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the schoolyard. She walked home with her usual calm steps, carrying her books and thinking quietly about her day. She had sensed the bullies following her from a distance, just as she had expected. They believed they were about to scare her, but she had been preparing for this moment for a long time. Her mind was clear, her body relaxed, and her senses sharp. She knew that patience would be her greatest advantage. The bullies blocked a narrow alleyway just a block from her home. They leaned casually against the walls, trying to act as if they had not been planning anything. One of them stepped forward, grinning, trying to intimidate her with his height and posture. He jostled her slightly, expecting her to stumble. She did not. She adjusted her stance smoothly, shifting her weight and remaining perfectly balanced. Her calmness unnerved them. They had expected fear, anger or hesitation, but she offered none of it. They laughed, trying to hide their unease, and pushed a little harder. She felt their movements, reading the energy of each step and anticipating their next actions. Her training had taught her to remain aware of multiple threats at once. She was not angry. She was observant. She let them make the first mistakes, knowing that their overconfidence would be their weakness. One of the bullies made a sudden move, pretending to shove her, hoping to provoke a reaction. She moved just slightly to the side, letting him lose balance for a moment. Her movements were fluid, controlled, and deliberate. They didn't realize she was not just avoiding them. She was controlling the situation. She had trained for years to handle unpredictability, and this was exactly the kind of challenge she had prepared for. Another stepped closer, trying to grab her arm. She met his approach with a small, precise block, redirecting his hand without hurting him. The movement was so smooth and unexpected that he stumbled slightly, causing the others to laugh nervously. They began to sense that they had underestimated her. They had expected her to be weak, but every step, every movement she made showed quiet strength. Their confidence began to waver. She spoke calmly, her voice steady and firm. "You don't need to do this. You're wasting your time." It was a simple statement, but it carried authority. The bullies glanced at each other, uncertain how to respond. No one had ever talked to them with such quiet power before. They had relied on loud voices, intimidation, and numbers to control situations. But here, one calm girl seemed to hold more control than all of them combined. Frustrated, one of them lunged forward, trying to push her against the wall. She stepped aside gracefully, using his momentum to guide him away from her, keeping herself safe and balanced. Another tried to block her path, but she sidestepped and continued walking slowly. She did not panic. She did not rush. Her movements were smooth, careful, and confident. The bullies were losing the sense of control they had expected. Their joking attitude began to fade, replaced by unease. She could feel their hesitation and recognized it as the perfect moment. Not to strike or hurt, but to demonstrate her strength. Her posture shifted slightly, showing readiness, confidence, and precision. Her eyes were focused on each movement, each shift in their stance, each breath they took. She was fully aware of the situation and her own abilities. The bullies, sensing something they could not define, slowed down, unsure of what she would do next. "Stop. This isn't necessary," she said again, still calm. Her voice was quiet but firm. It carried the weight of someone who knew her own strength and did not need to prove it through anger or violence. The bullies hesitated, exchanging glances. They had been the ones laughing, thinking they held power, but in this quiet moment, they realized the tables had turned. She had never raised her voice, never made a sudden move, yet she had already shown control over the situation. One of them tried a final push, aiming to scare her. She reacted with precise movements, shifting her weight, blocking the push, and guiding him away without harm. It was so unexpected that he stumbled, almost falling. The other bullies gasped, realizing that their joke had completely failed. They had underestimated her, thinking she was just a quiet girl who would cower. Instead, she had shown them control, skill, and confidence, all without raising her voice or striking aggressively. The quiet authority she displayed made the bullies rethink their approach. They were no longer laughing or joking. Their previous confidence had turned into doubt. They had entered the situation expecting amusement and power, but they found themselves facing calm, focused strength that did not need to shout or attack. Her composure was more intimidating than any loud threat could have been. Seeing their hesitation, she walked slowly, carefully, maintaining balance and control. She did not attack, she did not escalate. She simply moved with intention, showing them that she was unshaken, prepared, and in command of her actions. The bullies were forced to step back, unsure of how to proceed. Their plan to intimidate her had not only failed but had revealed their own inexperience against someone who was trained and confident. One of them muttered something about leaving, and the others agreed, their laughter gone. They stepped aside, watching her pass with a mixture of frustration, fear, and disbelief. For the first time, they realized that appearances could be deceiving. The quiet, shy girl they had mocked was far stronger, more aware, and more in control than they had imagined. They had underestimated her, and it was a lesson they would not forget. She continued walking home, her steps calm and steady, her mind focused on the events that had just unfolded. She felt no anger or pride, only a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had handled the situation with patience, observation, and precision. She had not needed to prove herself through aggression or shouting. Her calm authority had spoken for her. She knew that strength was not only physical, it was patience, intelligence, and self-control. Today, she had demonstrated all three. As she approached her home, she reflected on the encounter. The bullies had expected to intimidate her, but she had turned the situation into a lesson for them. She had shown that being calm, aware, and skilled could be far more powerful than brute force or loud words. She had faced them without fear, without anger, and without unnecessary aggression, and she had emerged in control. This was the moment that marked a turning point, not just for the bullies, but for her own confidence and understanding of her abilities. At home, her mother noticed a slight change in her daughter's demeanor. She seemed calmer, more confident, carrying herself with a quiet assurance that had not been there before. They shared a simple dinner, and her mother asked about her day. She spoke briefly, careful not to alarm her mother, but the sense of calm and quiet strength in her voice was evident. She did not need to explain what had happened to the bullies. She had handled it in a way that preserved dignity and control. Later that evening, she went to her small room, practicing her martial arts quietly. She moved through her forms, punches, kicks, and blocks, each movement precise and controlled. She reflected on the encounter, reviewing every step, every decision, every small action. She understood that today had been more than just a confrontation. It had been a test of patience, awareness, and self-control. She had passed it with quiet grace and confidence. She fell asleep that night with a sense of readiness. She knew the bullies might try again, but she also knew that she had already demonstrated that she was not an ordinary girl. Her strength was not just physical. It was mental, emotional, and strategic. She was ready to face whatever challenges came next, and she knew that when the time arrived, she would act with skill, precision, and calm confidence. The bullies had learned a lesson in underestimating others, and she had learned that true strength often comes quietly, without the need for spectacle or aggression. The next morning, she walked into school with the same quiet composure she always had. However, something had changed. Whispers followed her through the hallways, and students glanced at her differently. Some smiled, some looked surprised, and some avoided her gaze altogether. Word had spread quickly about the previous day, about how she had handled the bullies with calm authority and skill. The reputation she had tried to keep hidden was slowly becoming known, and it carried a mixture of respect and curiosity. She moved through the school corridors, greeting teachers politely, doing her usual work, and taking her seat in class. She noticed a few students who had previously teased her now watching her with interest rather than ridicule. She did not gloat or make a show of her abilities. She simply carried herself with quiet confidence. Her demeanor alone sent a message that she was no longer someone to be underestimated. During lunch, she sat at her usual table, and a few classmates who had once avoided her now sat nearby, engaging in casual conversation. They asked questions, laughing lightly, but she responded with polite and calm answers. Her presence seemed to shift the atmosphere. Students who had once whispered about her quietly were now speaking with curiosity, some asking for advice or even asking her to join in small games. She responded in her usual way, composed and respectful, never letting the attention make her feel superior. The bullies, on the other hand, were less certain about how to behave. Their usual confidence had been shaken, and they avoided direct confrontations with her. They whispered among themselves, trying to understand what had happened, replaying the events in their minds. The girl had not fought aggressively. She had not insulted them. She had simply controlled the situation with poise and precision. That was more intimidating than any shouting or striking could have been. They realized that underestimating her had been a serious mistake. Over the next few days, the school's atmosphere began to change subtly. Students started treating her with respect, even those who had never spoken to her before. Teachers noticed her calm composure and the way she handled challenges without raising her voice. They admired her self-discipline and her ability to remain focused even under pressure. Her reputation grew, not as someone who sought attention or fought aggressively, but as someone who carried herself with quiet strength. The bullies gradually came to terms with the situation. They realized that trying to intimidate her had not only failed but had revealed their own lack of awareness. A few of them even approached her privately to apologize for their behavior. She accepted their apologies with a calm nod, showing that she did not hold grudges, but also that she would not tolerate disrespect. The act of accepting their apologies further reinforced her presence as someone strong, confident, and fair. Outside of school, life continued in its usual rhythm. She helped her mother with chores, prepared meals, and managed homework. She continued her martial arts practice, not to prepare for further conflicts with bullies, but to maintain focus, discipline, and control. Her training had become a personal journey, a way to build her own confidence and strength rather than a means to intimidate others. She moved through her day with calmness and assurance, the quiet power she had demonstrated at school, now an integral part of her personality. Her mother noticed the subtle change in her daughter. She seemed more confident, composed, and self-assured. There was a quiet pride in her demeanor, a way she carried herself that spoke of inner strength. Her mother, who had always known her daughter was special, felt reassured that the lessons she had learned through years of martial arts training were manifesting in her everyday life. The mother-daughter bonds strengthened as they shared small moments of conversation, reflection, and encouragement. In school, the girl began to influence others in subtle ways. Students who had once been timid or bullied themselves started looking to her as an example. Her calm strength inspired them to face challenges without fear. She did not need to speak loudly or assert herself aggressively. Her composure, actions, and polite confidence were enough to encourage others to find courage within themselves. She became a quiet role model, not through force, but through demonstration of discipline and self-control. The bullies eventually learned to adjust their behavior. They no longer sought to provoke her, realizing that their attempts at intimidation were pointless. In fact, some of them began to respect her, understanding that strength could come in forms other than loudness or aggression. Over time, they even began to cooperate in group projects or social activities without trying to assert dominance. The change was gradual but meaningful, showing that one calm, composed individual could influence the behavior of an entire group. At home, evenings continued to be a time for reflection and practice. She would review her day, thinking about how she had handled challenges, how she had maintained composure, and how she could continue improving herself. She practiced movements in her room, flowing through forms with precision, thinking of her training not as preparation for conflict, but as a way to strengthen her mind and body. Her discipline and focus became a way to navigate life itself, giving her confidence in every interaction, whether at school, in the neighborhood, or at home. One afternoon, a group of younger students approached her in the courtyard, seeking guidance. They had heard about how she had handled the bullies and wanted to learn from her example. She spoke with them calmly, demonstrating simple ways to maintain composure and confidence without aggression. Her advice was practical, emphasizing observation, patience, and self-control. The younger students left feeling inspired and reassured, carrying with them a sense of courage they had not known before. Over time, her presence began to shift the school culture subtly. Students were more considerate, more aware of each other's feelings, and less inclined to bully or tease others. Teachers noticed a decrease in small conflicts and an increase in respectful interactions among students. Her influence was quiet but undeniable. Through calm strength, patience, and observation, she had created an environment where respect and discipline mattered more than intimidation or loudness. She never sought recognition or praise. Her actions were driven by personal principles, discipline, and the desire to navigate life with dignity and control. Her reputation grew not because she sought it, but because others observed her behavior and learned from it. The bullies, the classmates, and even the teachers came to see that true strength often came quietly, through consistent behavior and self-control, rather than through aggression or attention-seeking. Her mother often watched her daughter with pride, seeing the quiet influence she had on those around her. She knew that her training had done more than teach physical skills. It had instilled patience, discipline, and moral strength. The mother felt reassured that her daughter would navigate challenges wisely, with dignity, and without unnecessary confrontation. It was a moment of quiet satisfaction and deep emotional connection, a recognition that the values they shared were taking root and growing strong. Even as she grew older, the lessons from these early experiences remained with her. She continued her martial arts practice, maintained her composure in social situations, and inspired others through example rather than force. The bullies who had once sought to intimidate her were now merely part of the background of her life, a reminder that patience, awareness, and quiet confidence could transform situations and relationships. Her calm strength had not only protected her but had also influenced those around her in meaningful ways. By the end of the school year, her reputation was firmly established. She was known as someone calm, composed, and skilled, yet approachable and fair. Students who had once dismissed her as shy or weak now sought her guidance or simply admired the quiet confidence she carried. The bullies no longer held power over her or others. Instead, they had learned respect and, in some cases, humility. Her influence had shifted the dynamics of the school, proving that one person's quiet strength could create a ripple effect. At home, life continued in familiar routines. She helped with chores, shared meals with her mother, and practiced her martial arts in her small room. Yet, the quiet power she had developed and demonstrated in school gave her a deeper sense of confidence and self-worth. She understood that true strength was not just physical skill but the ability to remain composed, observant, and patient, even in the face of intimidation or conflict. This understanding guided her in every interaction, shaping her character and her approach to life. Evening skies became a time for reflection. She would sit by the window, looking out at the city, thinking about the day and the lessons it had offered. She considered the bullies, her classmates, her teachers, and even herself, recognizing how patience, calmness, and quiet strength could influence the world around her. These reflections were not for pride but for understanding and growth. They reminded her that her abilities were a tool for guidance, protection, and inspiration, not just personal achievement. Through these experiences, she learned that respect and influence could be earned quietly, without loud words or aggressive actions. She discovered that true confidence did not need validation from others and that patience and observation often yielded more powerful results than confrontation or impulsive action. The bullies, the classmates, and the broader school community had all been affected by her calm strength, even if they did not fully realize it. As the year progressed, she continued to move through life with quiet dignity. Her training remained an important part of her daily routine, not as preparation for conflict but as a way to cultivate discipline, focus, and awareness. She remained observant, compassionate, and composed, guiding her actions with thoughtfulness and self-control. Her reputation, though now widely recognized, did not change who she was at her core. A disciplined, quiet girl with hidden strength, capable of handling challenges with poise and inspiring others along the way. Months had passed since the day she faced the bullies, and life had taken on a new rhythm. School was no longer a place of constant anxiety for her. She walked the hallways with calm confidence, fully aware of her own abilities and the respect she had earned without ever raising her voice or acting aggressively. Her reputation had grown, not as someone to fear but as someone to admire for her patience, composure, and quiet strength. The bullies had changed their behavior. Some still had moments of misplaced bravado, but they no longer tried to intimidate her or anyone else. They had learned, through subtle yet firm demonstration, that strength could be quiet and patient, not loud and impulsive. She accepted apologies when offered, never holding grudges, and her example inspired others to behave more thoughtfully. Students who had once been timid began to take small steps toward confidence, encouraged by her presence and example. She had also begun mentoring younger students who faced similar challenges. They came to her for advice on how to handle teasing, how to remain calm in difficult situations, and how to build confidence without confrontation. She shared what she had learned from her own experiences, emphasizing observation, patience, and self-control. Her guidance was practical and compassionate, and it had a noticeable impact on those who listened. They left with a sense of empowerment that went beyond physical skill. They learned that mental and emotional strength mattered just as much. At home, life remained simple but full of meaningful routines. She helped her mother with daily chores, prepared meals, and studied diligently. Yet her training continued to be a cornerstone of her life. She practiced not for confrontation but for discipline, focus, and maintaining the balance of mind and body. Each movement, each block, and each stance was a reminder of her strength and of the patience that had allowed her to navigate challenges calmly. Her training had become a way of life, a foundation for resilience and self-assurance. Her mother noticed the subtle growth in her daughter. There was a maturity and confidence in her movements, in her interactions, and in the way she carried herself. She had learned that true strength was not about showing off or winning arguments. It was about control, observation, and measured response. Seeing her daughter grow into a person who could face challenges without fear or anger brought deep pride and reassurance. It reminded her mother that the values she had instilled through support and encouragement were taking root. School life became increasingly harmonious. Conflicts that had once seemed inevitable were handled more thoughtfully, and students learned to navigate social interactions with more care. She did not seek recognition for these changes, but her presence had an undeniable influence. Students learned by observing her, understanding that calm confidence could shift dynamics without confrontation. Teachers noticed a reduction in small conflicts, praising students who now approached challenges with greater patience and awareness. Her influence was quiet yet profound. One afternoon, during a school event, the girl was approached by a student who had previously been fearful and shy. The student asked how she had managed to remain calm in the face of intimidation, and she responded with simple advice. Observe, understand, and stay grounded. She emphasized that confidence did not come from aggression but from knowing your own capabilities and choosing your actions thoughtfully. The student listened intently, absorbing the lesson, and later reflected on how her guidance had helped them approach challenges with greater courage. The bullies, now aware of her consistent strength, occasionally sought her counsel themselves. They had come to realize that strength was not always about loud words or physical dominance. She guided them in understanding the importance of respect, patience, and humility. This was perhaps the most surprising transformation. Those who had once sought to assert dominance through fear had begun to adopt a more thoughtful approach to their actions. The change was subtle, but it was meaningful and lasting. As the year progressed, she continued to refine her abilities, both physical and mental. Her martial arts practice became a meditation in motion, a way to maintain focus, clarity, and calmness. She learned to handle stress, pressure, and unexpected challenges with poise. Life outside school also required discipline. Balancing responsibilities, helping at home, and navigating friendships, but her consistent training and mental preparation allowed her to face everything with quiet confidence. She had learned that true strength was enduring, adaptable, and measured. Her mother often reflected on how her daughter had grown. The girl had not only mastered physical skill, but had also demonstrated emotional intelligence, patience, and leadership. She could handle conflicts calmly, guide others thoughtfully, and maintain self-respect without resorting to anger or aggression. These qualities, cultivated through years of training and life experience, set her apart as someone capable of influencing her surroundings in meaningful ways. The mother felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing her daughter's growth would serve her well in all aspects of life. By the end of the school year, she had earned respect from nearly every student and teacher. Her presence was a stabilizing force, a reminder that calm strength could transform social dynamics. She had become a role model for many, not through intimidation or aggression, but through consistent composure, skill, and integrity. Those who had once teased or underestimated her now admired and respected her, and she had shown that leadership could come quietly, without arrogance or display. The lessons she had learned extended beyond school. She understood that life would present challenges, people who would try to intimidate or test her, and situations requiring patience and clarity. She had developed the tools to navigate all of these with composure. Her quiet confidence allowed her to make decisions based on reason and understanding rather than emotion or impulsiveness. She had discovered that true empowerment came from within, from discipline, self-awareness, and a clear understanding of one's own abilities. Over time, she also became a source of inspiration for her community. Younger children who observed her discipline and respect for others began to emulate her behavior. Parents and teachers noticed the positive influence she had, recognizing that her quiet example encouraged empathy, respect, and patience among those around her. She had not sought recognition, yet her actions had created a ripple effect, spreading lessons of inner strength and thoughtful action beyond her immediate circle. Even in casual interactions, she maintained her calm, confident demeanor. Whether helping someone in need, offering advice, or simply navigating daily routines, she approached each situation with consideration and clarity. Her training in martial arts had taught her not just physical skills, but also mental discipline, focus, and ethical responsibility. She understood that strength came with accountability, and she carried herself accordingly, demonstrating integrity in every interaction. As she continued to grow, she realized that her journey was not just about defending herself but about understanding herself and influencing the world positively. She had learned to face fear with composure, to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively, and to lead through example rather than words. These lessons, gained through personal experience and disciplined practice, had shaped her into a person who could inspire, guide, and protect, all while remaining humble and grounded. Looking back, she understood how far she had come. The timid, quiet girl who had once been underestimated by bullies had grown into a confident, composed, and respected individual. Her journey was a testament to the power of patience, observation, and quiet strength. She had learned that true confidence did not require aggression or showiness, that real influence came from consistent, thoughtful actions, and that even one person could create meaningful change through composure and integrity. Her story, though personal, carried universal lessons. It showed that appearances could be deceiving, that strength could be quiet and controlled, and that discipline, patience, and integrity were more powerful than fear or intimidation. She had not only protected herself but had also influenced those around her positively, creating a ripple effect of respect, awareness, and calm confidence. Her journey was a reminder that inner strength, cultivated and applied wisely, could transform not just one life, but many. By the time she was ready to move on to new challenges, she carried with her the lessons learned from every experience. The encounters with bullies, the guidance she had provided to others, the daily discipline of her training, and the quiet victories she had achieved. She had discovered that true power was not in dominance, but in understanding, patience, and the ability to act with clarity and purpose. And as she faced the future, she knew that she could navigate any challenge with the same calm, quiet strength that had defined her journey from the very beginning.